with that being said, the first question is going to be for Baba Khan, and it's going to be addressing the elephant in the room. So my question is, at the national level, are there any concerns that the Democratic Party and its politically aligned media outlets is attempting to weaponize the work of NCOBRA against the legitimate frustrations of our people who are no longer willing to give their votes without policies that are specifically targeted at improving the conditions in our community? And but before you answer that question, I would say just keep in mind, Malcolm and ballot to the bullet, and he told us to put that vote back in our pocket, and get that vote. So I'm not going to bias the question. You can answer the question yourself.
Yeah, well, weaponizing the work that NCOBRA is doing. Well, we're not overly concerned with what's going on with the Democratic Party in this current phase of public attention on reparations. We have some concerns, but not overly concerned. For instance, there's a concern that these candidates are playing lip service to the issue of reparations and simply to pander for the Black vote. We know that a main purpose of a politician, or one of the main characteristics of a politician, is to say things that they really don't mean, but just to get the vote. So, these are politicians at the highest level. So that's a concern, that this is only lip service. Another concern is that during this conversation that reparations is being minimalized. What actually is reparations that some of these candidates are saying that there is, and if there's agreement with those who are in this alternative media with what they're saying, does that then become what our ancestors get after 400 years of terror and theft of our productive capabilities in this country? So that's a concern, even though we know that there has been pushback from some of the people in the media. I'm thinking you're talking about social media.
No. So my question more so relates to, and this was when you were on Brother Elliott's Time for an Awakening show last week. I called in, I asked you the same question, and it was more so about the brother minister after his appearance on MSNBC. My concern and the critique that I gave was I felt that, his affiliation with NCOBRA was, weaponized against the legitimate, gripes that have been captured by ADOS. So more so, I was saying, do you have concerns that both the Democratic Party during the election process and media outlets will attempt to use NCOBRA to silence legitimate gripes of our people?
Let me weigh. Can I weigh in on this? Because let me weigh in on this. We're approaching this particular current phenomenon in presidential candidates and the relationship to the issue of reparations as if it's a new phenomenon. That's number one. So in 1972 in Gary, Indiana, at the National Black Political Convention, the Republic of New Africa, under the leadership of one of the founders of NCOBRA, Dr. Imari Obadele, and Queen Mother Moore, infused into the convention of 10,000 participants from all over the country to push forward the idea that reparations should be a part of the Black political agenda. This was in Gary, Indiana, in March of 1972. And so Queen Mother Moore, being one of the stalwart leaders in the reparations movement, coming out of 1955 with her Reparations for Descendants group and organization with Dar Abubakara, who actually went to the United Nations in 1962 demanding reparations. By the time she emerged with the founding of the Republic of New Africa as a citizen, she was a representative along with Dr. Imari Obadele to fight for the inclusion of the idea of reparation to be in the agenda. That occurred. And as a result, the demand for reparations was presented to all of the presidential candidates who were running for president in 1972. So every election cycle since then, the issue of reparation has been an attempt to put it into the conversation. In 2000, NCOBRA was successful under the leadership of Dorothy Lewis Benton, Sister Marcia Reiki mentioned, who was the national co-chair, along with Hannibal Lafrique in the 2000 election, and they were successful in getting it infused in the Democratic Party platform. The point I'm making is that this is not a new idea, but because of social media, the idea has been manipulated as if it's a new phenomenon. So, the idea of reparation has been a protracted movement that emerged after the Civil War. So if we don't understand it in that context, and for those who are listening who may not be familiar with a concept called protracted. So this movement has been a protracted movement coming out of the National Ex-Slave Bounty and Pension Association in the 1890s, who filed the first reparations lawsuit in 1915. So for us to get hung up in what's going on with politicians in a presidential election cycle, when surveys indicate that the masses of Black people now have been educated enough to understand and support the idea of reparations. So NCOBRA steps in with a program that has been conceptualized, it's online, around the concept of full repair. So I think it's a tactical error for us to listen to what I'm saying, for us to get hung up about what presidential candidates are saying. The idea is to build a mass movement to consolidate the demand, to have unity among the Black liberation movement and other forces in the United States to force the issue of reparation to finally be accepted in legislative and political legal forms. And that's where maybe Cam and Manzariki can speak to, because I think that this whole idea of responding to Mark Thompson, who was one of my godsons, who was on MSNBC and all of that, is an error. What we need to be focusing in on is urging the masses of our people to show up in Detroit at the 31st annual convention of the National Black United Front that the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan is supporting. And Cam and I met with him last week, and we all know that the Nation of Islam, rolling out under the Elijah Muhammad, put into its program in Muhammad's speech the demand for reparations. So there's a lot of historical work that we need to do so we can perhaps address historical discontinuity that's taking place through the internet, social media, and Twitter by a lot of people who have not done any studying. This issue of reparation means repair for the damages inflicted on captured Africans who were enslaved in this country, in the Western Hemisphere, on the continent of Africa, throughout Europe. There's a worldwide African reparation movement. And what has happened recently is some hijacking of that history and those relationships. So I just would like to take the conversation in another direction.
Well, in other words, put some respect on his name. Yeah? That's coming from your OGs right there. For all these young people listening, that's your OG. That's a general talking. That's a real soldier that's been on the front lines talking. That's general talk. He said he studied, man. He been putting in this work. We went back to 72 on him. Come on, man. What are you talking about? You put respect on these elders' names. He's going back to 72 and giving you knowledge, history, and understanding of your culture and the fight and struggle that's been going on. Go back and study what he said. Press rewind on that. That's a general talking. So respect the general, private soldier.
All right. So let me because I want to keep the conversation centered, because we definitely have a great deal of questions to get through, and I don't want Baba Conrad to answer all my questions before I even get a chance to ask.
Well, after I've done what I've done, I can get off the air, because what needs to happen, I can get off the conversation. Cam and Mazariki need to explain NCOBRA's program.
Yeah.
Because NCOBRA has a program of full repair. NCOBRA has been very instrumental in revising HR 40, and that's where we need to go. All roads lead to Detroit in June.
Okay, so Baba Conrad, let me finish. Let me moderate here, because all those are questions that I have. So we're going to get to them one by one. But I wanted to stick here for 1 second, and the reason why I want to do that is because you did raise a good point of, in the social media age, the issue of historical discontinuity as a result of these movements that take place purely online, but are detached from the grassroots. So as a result, they are detached from the institutional memory that exists at the grassroots, because they're happening apart from that. But with that being said, I think we would be remiss not to acknowledge that, you mentioned that the year 2000 was the last time we saw a very significant push for reparations at the national level. But within the—
No, I didn't say that.
Okay,
I didn't say that.
What did you say about the year 2000?
No, no. See, we were talking about the presidential candidates, and now it's on their lips. And what I'm saying, it's on their lips because there's been a movement that's protracted that forced the environment, so it's on their lips. Now that's done. Now let's get back to our work. What I'm saying is the idea of presidential candidates speaking on reparations is not new. The height of the reparations movement for African people in the world occurred when we went to Durban, South Africa in 2001, where the whole world, if you look at the New York Times, Washington Post, Newsweek Times, and major media outlets that dominated the news from the summer of 2001 all the way to 9/11, when we had a setback on the discussion of reparation, in which we've been trying to make a comeback. So we have to put all these things in context, because people have been working on this a long time, and it's not understood. This is not a pop-up issue on social media and Twitter. It's not.
Agree. Let me cut you off. Let me cut you off, Baba Conrad, because when we get to the end of this conversation, one of the things that I'm hoping the conversation will be driving us to is unity, and an opportunity for the two camps to find areas of convergence that they can work together on. But what I want to say is, and I really think it's very important to acknowledge this. So I'll maybe put the question in a different way. That in the social media era, for example, we know that in 2008, Barack Obama, then candidate Barack Obama, used social media for the first time to corral the masses, so to speak, to get out the vote. We saw in the 2016 election, although I don't necessarily buy into the Russian bot propaganda, but we saw that activity online not only has the ability to influence the consciousness of the citizenry or the voter bloc, it also has the ability to influence the national discussion in ways that we've never seen before. So with that being said, the amount of power that social media puts in the hands of our people and allows them to force a discussion. And I think that, Dr. Carr mentioned online, that one of the beautiful things about this ADOS movement is it may be teaching us, maybe we don't get it right with this one, but it may be teaching us how to do social media the right way, but also understanding the threats of it. I say all that to say that being on Twitter, I know for sure that the ADOS activity has been the activity that has put reparations on the lips of every candidate and on every publication. But as a result of that, the candidates, meaning the party, and also like the mainstream media outlets associated with the party, have attempted to use NCOBRA to smack back at the ADOS group. And my concern with that is it may drive a wedge between elders and youth that doesn't need to be there. So I was asking, do you guys have any concern with being weaponized against the youth, even though we disagree with the tactics and the philosophy of the leadership of the movement? I don't think that we necessarily, the tactics and the philosophy of the leadership of ADOS, I don't think that we necessarily want to alienate the young people who are being introduced or who have been introduced to reparations via ADOS, and we don't want them to see NCOBRA as their enemy. So we're hoping.
But brother, in all due respect, I think we're giving too much energy to ADOS. They're not a movement, number one. And I think the conversation needs to turn in to what role has NCOBRA played, what is NCOBRA's program, and what is the organizing strategy rolling out of NCOBRA. Because if we keep doing it, reparation is not a pop-up issue for Twitter and Facebook. It's a different kind of issue. When you're talking about repairing an African people for 400 years, you have to have some knowledge of history and all that's gone on to repair the damages inflicted by that historical process. So yes, technology is very important because it got an old man like me into it, and I intend to intensify my contribution to it. But that is not it can't be applied to Barack Obama running to president of the United States and using that technology. That's just one thing to get a Negro to go vote. Reparation is deeper than getting a Negro to go vote. It's about repairing for damages of a people. So it's much deeper and requires much more sophistication and organizing tactics and strategies, in which technology is just one aspect. So that's why I'm trying to turn the conversation. ADOS, they're there. ADOS is a phenomenon. It's something that just popped up. But NCOBRA has been here since 1988. Let's talk about the work of NCOBRA and try to encourage some of the young people who may not have this history to show up in Detroit in June for the 31st conference. That's where I'd like to see the conversation go. And maybe I need to get off because I'm very, this is my last run on this. I'm an old man.
If we could, so let's go to the question like the general has been advising us. Let's go to the questions.
Okay, let me move to that. Well, that was just my first question, right? Because
how about that?
That particular question was the elephant in the room, and I wanted to
go on, Brother Omawale.
Okay.
This elephant in the room. This is something that is totally new to the reparations movement. There has never been, and Dr. Worrell would probably agree, there's never been a time where there's been a public disagreement among proponents of the movement the way we're seeing today. There's been disagreement amongst those who support reparations and those who disagree. White America's always been able to go get a black person and say, no, I'm against reparations. But this is the first time, and since I've been in the movement for about 14 years, that there's ever been this type of public disagreement among proponents of reparations.
That is brilliant. That I really appreciate you hitting that, because that pushes us in the right direction. So if you don't understand what he just said, never in the history of the reparations movement have we had a schism where two camps who are both for reparations or at each other the way that we see right now. So with that being said, I guess the next question is for you, Baba Cam, and it's very easy. Just tell us when NCOBRA was created and